what to watch for, Michigan's role, and how voters really feel about the frontrunners. It's not politics as usual. MiWeek is live tonight in Detroit for our presidential primary coverage.
From the moment you wake up till you turn out the light, Masco is proud to be part of your everyday life. When you turn on the faucet for a cool drink of water, open a kitchen cabinet to set the family table, or freshen up a room with a new coat of paint, you do it all with Masco products. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek's live pre-presidential primary show. I'm Christy McDonald. We are live in Detroit tonight at 2 James, and we thought talking politics the night before the primary, where would we want to do that? And our contributors, Nolan Finley, Stephen Henderson, you know them well, they said, let's do it in a bar.
You shouldn't have asked.
Well, I know.
What could possibly go wrong tonight?
Okay,
right?
So you have to explain this group of people that we've gathered here tonight, Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, Steve and I, for the last year or so, have been gathering a group of folks together every month or two, Republicans, Democrats, conservative, liberal, young, old, people at all walks of life, all careers, just to bring them together to talk, get to know each other, and prove that you can disagree about politics and other things without being uncivil, without hating one another, without fighting, and it's worked.
Which is interesting in this election cycle, because you wouldn't seem that would be true.
Well, the bourbon helps, right? The bourbon makes
sometimes it hurts.
everybody's outlook a little less edgy than it normally is.
All right, so we have a full show tonight, but I want to get your thoughts about the race so far. And Stephen, let me start with you. What are your thoughts so far?
Well, I mean, I think Hillary Clinton will probably win the Democratic primary. Donald Trump will probably win the Republican. It may not look exactly the way the polls are showing us right now, but those seem to be pretty much fait accompli.
You're not totally in agreement with that, Nolan.
I'm not sure he's wrong about the outcome, but what we've been seeing over the last couple of days on the Republican side is that this antitrust Trump effort, this millions of spending to bring down the Republican frontrunner, is starting to pay dividends. The tracking polls I've seen show a real surge for John Kasich. The late closing polls have shown Kasich much closer to Trump than he has been. I think you could see a very strong showing for John Kasich tonight or tomorrow night. Going into next week's election in Ohio, that could position him very well.
But what we've known about this race so far is anything that we keep saying, well, we think that's going to happen. It ends up happening out the other way.
And frankly, if John Kasich does really well tomorrow, the losers there are the Republican establishment. They need Ted Cruz to do really well.
Oh, that's absolutely
because he's
not
the
true.
only person who has any chance of overtaking Donald Trump. Kasich hasn't done well enough in the other primaries.
Steve, the establishment is just about as appalled at Ted Cruz as they are Trump. They're looking for either Kasich or Rubio to step up.
But to have any chance in November,
and are they going to have enough numbers?
They're going to have Cruz over Trump.
There's
no way Kasich can catch it.
I don't think they agree with that.
All right, so this is
just Trump's a better candidate.
This is just the example of respectfully disagreeing with each other. So we have a great room filled here at 2 James of politicians, we have pundits, we have business people, we have voters, all packed in one place, and we're glad that you're with us here tonight. Follow us on social media. Tell us what you think. We are live now for the next half hour. But let's go ahead and start you off tonight with a look at where the race stands right about now.
Then I ask you to stand with us as a broad coalition of people who believe in the Constitution, believe in freedom.
We have to focus on what must be done to help the people of Flint.
Michigan is ground zero for politics this week, hosting 2 debates in the days leading up to Tuesday's presidential primary. Republicans on Thursday in Detroit, the Democrats on Sunday in Flint. For Republicans, establishment candidates like Marco Rubio are looking for traction.
The jobs of those of us in public service are to put in place policies that allow the economy to grow.
Ohio Governor John Kasich is hoping his Midwest neighbor can hand him his first win.
Because throughout this campaign, I've talked about issues. I have never tried to go and get into these kind of scrums that we're seeing here on the stage, and people say everywhere I go, you seem to be the adult on the stage.
Donald Trump continues to swing at Ted Cruz and to run away with voters who see him as a straight-talking non-politician, a stance that makes some GOP bigwigs sweat as Trump gets closer to the nomination.
Let me tell you something, Ted. The last person that Hillary Clinton wants to face is Donald Trump. That I can.
As for the Democrats, Hillary Clinton's focus on Flint and Super Tuesday wins move her ahead. But Bernie Sanders continues to rally young voters across Michigan.
You know that in 1960, Detroit, Michigan was one of the wealthiest cities in America. And what happened is corporate America said, why do I want to pay somebody in Michigan a living wage when I could pay slave wages in Mexico or China?
Michigan is in an interesting position. There are 59 delegates for Republicans, 147 delegates for Democrats, both awarded proportionately. Candidates are focusing on issues that resonate here in Michigan: the economy, education, and immigration. Usually presidential contenders look for a governor's endorsement before a state primary, but not now, as Governor Snyder's handling of the Flint water crisis has become a national rallying cry for Democrats, pointing at failure in Republican leadership. Voters will have to decide on Tuesday.
I'm concerned in Michigan about our infrastructure, and not just here in Michigan, but all over the country. I think it's important to invest in that.
I feel like the next presidential candidate really needs to promote education and getting money towards that area.
All right, so now that we've set up the race for you a little bit, let's bring in some of our local pundits for us. Dennis Darnoy is a Republican analyst. Dennis, it's good to see you.
Thank you for having us.
And Howard Edelson is a Democratic strategist. So thanks so much for being here. And you guys have been kind of working in tandem now for the last couple of days, it feels like, huh?
Yeah, we're taking our show on the road, and we ended up here tonight. So yeah, thank
I
you
like
for having
it.
us.
All right, I'm going to start with you, Dennis, and kind of characterize how do you feel the race has kind of turned out right now. How would you characterize where we are?
In a very interesting place, because I don't think anyone...
Interesting is an interesting word.
It sure is. I mean, 6 months ago, no one was going to say that Trump was going to be the front runner, but that's where we are today, and a pretty clear front runner at that. Now, I agree with what Nolan had said. I think John Kasich is making a good push here at the end, and Marco Rubio may end up being the big loser in tomorrow night's thing. But yeah, it's incredibly interesting.
All right, Howard, what's your take?
Well, I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime election. As Dennis was saying, a year ago, who would have thought that it would have been Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton as the presumptive, or at least leaders? And it just keeps, it's a very entertaining race. And when you look at the Republican side, the Republican debates, it's like Republican candidates gone wild. And it's just amazing. Every time you think it can't get any worse, it does. And I'm afraid to let my 4-year-old actually listen to the debate.
Now, do you think that's a fair characteristic? Would you say that the Republicans have kind of gone off the rails a little bit with the insults and the jabs? Or are they staying on message?
I think they are doing a great job driving up viewership. So, I mean, a lot of people are viewing, watching the debates. More people are voting on the Republican side. So something's working. Not sure what, but it's certainly working in terms of ginning up votes.
All right, Howard, the Democrats have really spent a lot of time here in Michigan. And Bernie Sanders here again today. Hillary Clinton is here in Detroit tonight. How would you say the race is coming down here for the Democrats?
I think first, the fact that Democrats are here is a good thing. It's really showcasing urban policy and having an adult conversation of what our city, what our challenges, and what our problems are for big cities. So it's good that they're here. I think it's going to come down tomorrow. Hillary Clinton will win. I think it's how big of a win. I think she needs at least a double-digit win tomorrow to really come out strong. Anything less, given her strong standing here in Michigan, might not be as good for her.
Democrats really concentrated on Flint at their debate on Sunday night, and they were also talking about Detroit public schools. That Republicans kind of got knocked because they didn't talk enough maybe about the Flint water crisis or Detroit. What was your take on that, Dennis?
Sure, and I would have liked to have seen the moderators sort of get the debate back on policy. They let it go on for about 90 minutes on personal issues when I think there was a substantial debate that could have been had, and it was a missed opportunity. Hopefully in the next debate we'll see something of more substance.
I think every time the presidential primary primary comes around in Michigan, everyone looks and says, all right, Michigan's very important in this race. Are we giving ourselves a little too much credit, or is Michigan still really one of those states that everyone is watching right now, Howard?
I think in this election cycle, we are an important state. We're the first Midwestern state to cast their primary. We've had Northeast and Midwest, or Iowa, and we've had Northeast and some Southern. So we're the first Midwest state with diversity in the schedule. So I think we're going to play a prominent role coming out of here.
And I'd say on the Republican side, we are a springboard into the winner-take-all delegates, the March 15th. So whoever wins tomorrow is going to have an advantage going into those races.
All right, guys, biggest cliches you've heard so far in the races.
I'll let Howard take that one.
Oh, no. There's no buzz phrases that you're tired of hearing already in the election process?
I can make America great again.
Yeah, that is a very good Trump impersonation. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Howard Edelson,
right, thank
Dennis
you very much.
Darnoy, thanks so much, guys. All right, well, I let Stephen and Nolan go. They left. They're out in the crowd somewhere, so I am going to head on over to Stephen. Who you have, Stephen?
All right, I am here with State Senator Bert Johnson of the 2nd District of the state of Michigan. Represents Detroit, Grosse Pointe, Harper Woods, Highland Park, and Hamtramck, correct?
That was impressive.
Look at that, I got it all right. All right, you are a Bernie Sanders supporter for president. Tell me why.
Well, a lot of what he thinks mimics what it is that I feel is important to get out into the national discourse. Obviously, what Bernie has inspired in so many people across the country is his feeling of being able to still be in charge of their government. And at a time when people are concerned about tuition payments and how to get young people active and, frankly, how to bring the cost of living down in the country and income inequality and all that kind of stuff, that resonates not just with me but with the people that I represent. And, we're not just talking about the poor and disenfranchised of the city of Detroit sometimes, but there are very affluent people that I represent who feel the exact same way. And so there's a movement afoot. And what Bernie Sanders is reminding folks is that you can still be a citizen activist and harness the power of activism.
All right, let me ask you this. We had a Democratic debate last night in Flint, a question to Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton about race, about relating to race, what you think about race. Bernie looked really uncomfortable to me. Forget about what he said. He looked like he was thrown by the question. Does that bother you as an African American? Do you think that bothers your constituents as African Americans?
Actually, it didn't bother me at all. Frankly, I think Bernie is so authentic that he's always speaking up from the heart. He's always speaking off the cuff. And I'd like to remind people that his answer on race was intrinsic versus Hillary's, which was, she always had to talk about how people brought her to an understanding, how she was told that she needed to go down that street or be a part of that organization. That's okay, but as it relates to Bernie and race, I think he's authentic, and I think he's going to have some of those uncomfortable moments. I hardly know any white folk who are very comfortable talking about the issue of race, particularly when it relates to the disenfranchisement of perhaps black or brown people. So, it's an uncomfortable scenario probably for anybody.
All right. Okay, let's go to Nolan Finley, who has someone over on the other side of the room. Thank you very much, Bert Johnson.
Well, thanks, Steve. As we said in the opening, we've got a lot of very politically savvy people in the room with us tonight, folks who've been around Michigan politics for a while. I'm joined by Melissa Roy, an independent political strategist consultant from Macomb County. Now, Melissa, everybody's looking at Macomb County, trying to see if there's going to be a revival of the Reagan Democrats. We keep hearing about Trump's appeal to blue-collar union workers, and everybody seems to be trying to figure out those voters this cycle. What are you hearing in Macomb County? What are those voters thinking about this election cycle?
Thanks, Nolan. Well, I think really what's happening in this election is that the voters feel abandoned. They feel apathetic, and they want to feel some passion behind a candidate. And I think whether that's Bernie Sanders on the left or that's Donald Trump on the right, I think John Kasich really wrapped it up in the debate last week when he talked about voters wanting to feel something and wanting to feel important and feel like somebody's taking care of them. So I don't think it's necessarily a wrap-up for Trump. I think, to your point, I think Kasich's making some good leads, and I think there's a lot of hope for him here in Michigan.
But in our poll last week, Donald Trump's strength was highest in Macomb County than anywhere in Michigan. These workers have done fairly well over the last few years. Their jobs are coming back. Macomb County's coming back. Why are they so angry?
I don't know that they're angry. I think they feel abandoned. I think it's like the rest of the country. The country's doing well financially, but overall, everybody feels disenfranchised. They feel like they've been left out of the economy and out of civic leadership.
Well, thanks, Melissa. Everybody's going to be watching Macomb County tomorrow. Thank you for being with us.
All right, thanks so much, Nolan. And joining me now is Paul Welday. He's a Republican consultant. And Dennis Archer Jr., an attorney, Detroit business leader. Man about time.
I'm just happy to be here.
I know. We see you guys all the time, but it's good to have you here tonight. Let's talk a little bit about, how you're gauging the race right now. What are people talking about? Because I tell you, every time you go on social media, my Facebook feed is filled with just crazy up and down all around. People seem so invested in this and very polarized, I think.
Well, it's a very passionate time. We're on, the eve before the election, and everybody's supporters are out there on the phone working this. I just left an event in Oakland County where John Kasich was speaking to upwards of 1,000 people. He's really surging in this state, as I heard Nolan say before. So this is an exciting time to be in Michigan, watching what's happening and discussing these issues.
Dennis, what do you think?
I think that we're very fortunate because a lot of the discussion has been around not only the urban challenges that we have here in Detroit from an education standpoint and obviously what's happening in Flint, but those are just microcosms of similar issues in urban America.
Absolutely.
And so with those two particular issues being on the forefront, I think it's bringing a lot of discussion to what's needed from an urban policy standpoint.
As we look at everyone who is around the bar right now at 2 James and they're talking about politics, when you go out with some of your friends and everyone's sitting and talking about this race, what are some of the biggest issues that are coming up?
I think jobs, the economy, economic opportunities, clearly education. What we see happening here in the city of Detroit from an education standpoint is not just happening here. So how do we provide world-class education for our kids so they can be competitive in the workplace?
I would agree with that, but I'm also hearing a lot about immigration. Those issues are still at the forefront, even though we're on the northern border. And we're still hearing a lot about foreign policy and defense issues. ISIS is a conversation just about everywhere you go these days.
What kind of turnout do you think that we're going to get tomorrow, Paul?
In fact, I talked to the Secretary of State, Ruth Johnson, just before coming over here tonight, and she said it's going to be a record turnout, in large part because Democrats are going to be participating for the first time. We never really had both Republicans and Democrats in a primary election, so it's going to be huge.
Do you think people, Dennis, still realize that their vote does count so much, even if it's a presidential primary like this?
I think so. I think there's been so much attention paid, particularly in this primary, that people are going to be encouraged to go out and vote on both sides. And I think very recently the Democrats have seen a surge in excitement similar to the excitement the Republicans have had for some time.
Well, when you look at the combination of the Detroit debate for the Republicans Thursday, you had the Flint debate last night, you had the town hall meeting at the Gem Theater tonight.
And when's the last time you've seen anything like that?
Yeah.
So why don't you just go ahead and give us your last thoughts in terms of, coming up, and maybe just give me an overview on, have we ever seen an election like this?
I don't think that any of us, Paul, can say that we've seen an election like this, and I think we can both agree we'd never like to see another one like this, but hopefully the issues will rise to the forefront. The voter turnout will be high, and people will vote their conscience.
Well, we still have a long way to go. It ain't over till it's over.
Absolutely.
And it ain't over.
And I said at the top of the show, just when you think you know exactly what's going to happen, that means it's not going to happen at all. All right. So,
Thanks very much.
Dennis Archer Jr., Paul Welday, thanks so much for joining us. Remember, we are live right now. If you've got something to tell us on social media, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us at MiWeek on Twitter. All right, so the presidential primaries tomorrow here in Michigan, but how much do you really know about Michigan's primary? Here's a little Michigan primary 101 for you.
Michigan is no longer an open primary state. To prevent crossover voting just to mess with the other party, lawmakers fixed it so voters have to say which party they want to vote in before they get a ballot. The desire to make Michigan's vote count in presidential party elections has gotten us into hot water with the national committees. Remember 2008? Democratic leaders stripped Michigan of all of our delegates as punishment for scheduling an early presidential primary. It violated party rules. But good thing the state's Republicans learned from the Democrats' mistake, right? Well, they didn't. In 2012, Michigan was given 59 delegates to the GOP National Convention, but then lost 29 as a penalty for setting a February 28th primary date instead of the March 6th date, which was set by the national party. Okay, but at least when we do play by the party rules, we have our finger on the pulse of the nation. So goes Michigan, so goes the rest of the country, right? Well, not really. In 1916, guess who won the first Republican primary? Henry Ford won with 83,000 votes. Then the world's most famous entrepreneur switched parties and took first place again in 1924, but Ford never got either party nomination. In 1980, voters went for George Bush, getting almost twice what that guy Ronald Reagan got. Although the senior Bush felt voters' love, his son never won a Michigan Republican primary. Bob Dole took tops in 96, and McCain was the favorite in 2000. One thing is clear. Michiganders usually vote for the hometown candidates. We saw that with Henry Ford and Gerald Ford when he ran against Carter. And Mitt Romney pulled out a win in 2008 and 2012.
All right, and joining me now to talk a little bit about the whole Trump factor and how this election is different than any that we've seen before, and kind of the anti-establishment vibe, is Kathy Hoekstra. She's a conservative commentator. Kath, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely, great to be here.
All right, why don't you go ahead and just start off, and how is this race different when we're looking at the Republican nominees?
Well, I think what's happening, I read an analysis last week that seems to be actually coming true, especially based on Cruz's increased numbers of delegates over the weekend. And what's happening is you're having Donald Trump with his brand of angry populism and Ted Cruz's brand of pure conservatism, for a lack of a better term. And what's happening is they are managing to reach a common voter base that wants the same thing. No matter which brand of conservatism you want to go for, they want the same thing. They want a nation where they can feel safe. They want secure borders. And they want to think that the average American has an opportunity to get ahead and be better off than they were before. So I think those two, with their brands of conservatism, are able to reach these voters. And unfortunately, Marco Rubio his messaging has just been too vague. It hasn't been cohesive enough. I think his campaigns in the states haven't been good enough to really get him any sort of traction. So I think that's kind of what's happening.
And so much has been made, though, about now talking about establishment Republicans and then the front runners right now. And now you have a lot of the establishment Republicans saying, we've got to stop Donald Trump, and that the Republican Party is in trouble. Is the Republican Party in trouble?
I don't know if the Republican Party is in trouble. I think from every sort of, when you come up with anything like this, you're going to get a phoenix rising out. And what that phoenix looks like on the other end, I don't really know. But what's interesting is I think we are seeing Governor Kasich from Ohio with a new brand of conservatism. He's appealing to the fiscal conservatism. And I'll be really interested to see how he does tomorrow here in Michigan.
All right, Kathy Hoekstra, stay right here with me. Nolan, I'm going to go out to you in the crowd, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to talk about Donald Trump.
Well, look, we've been hearing a lot about the Republican establishment. I am here with the Republican establishment in Michigan. Ron Weiser. Ron is the former finance chair for the National Committee. Ron, talk to us about the various scenarios, why Michigan will matter tomorrow, and how Michigan can change this race.
Well, this election's going to, you've had the debates, everybody's looked. This is the first election in a large Midwestern industrial state, and this is going to tell a lot about what's going to happen above the Mason-Dixon line.
Now, Ron, we've been hearing a lot about the political divide in the Republican Party, and we know there's an anti-Trump movement that's being well-funded. What are you doing? What is the party doing to make sure you can come together when this thing is all said and done? Because you still got an election in November.
Well, these elections have been a lot more than just Republicans. I think you know that. Mm-hmm. The people who are showing up to the polls are a lot more than just Republicans in the Republican primaries. And I think as the Republican Party is looking at the important things that they have to do, including keeping the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate and keeping focus on that, as well as winning the presidency. And of course, they are looking at the many constituencies that are part of that party, which include evangelicals and conservatives and gun rights people and a variety of people who've come together as a coalition.
Now, Ron, you've raised a lot of money over the years for the Republican Party. Do you think if Donald Trump's the nominee, you'll be able to raise that same kind of money for the party?
Well, Donald Trump has made it clear that he's going to self-finance this election. And I think
so that's a relief for guys like you, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is a lot of people saying, let's do what we'll take him at his word.
Okay, Ron Weiser, thank you for being with us. Steve.
Hello, Steve. I'm here with Jamal Simmons, a former staffer in the Clinton White House from the 90s, now a political consultant. So you see him on CNN, you see him on MSNBC, and most important, he is a Detroit native. Jamal Simmons, welcome to MiWeek. Yeah.
It's good to be on.
All right, so I want to ask you from a national perspective, where do you feel like Michigan fits in to what we've seen in other states?
Well, Michigan matters because it always matters. It matters in the general election. Who can win Michigan is a big deal. Right now, in the Clinton-Sanders fight in particular, Clinton's done really well in the South. She did really well in Iowa. And if Sanders can not win in Michigan, or if he can win in Michigan, then it proves that he actually has some swing and he can do something more than what people expect. But the odds are that he's probably going to have a really tough shot here tomorrow.
Yeah, you don't see him connecting with the sort of core Democratic constituencies that we have in Michigan, African American voters, unions. I thought it was really interesting that the unions stayed out of this contest. They didn't endorse. If they'd endorsed him, I thought he would have had a better chance.
Absolutely, because I'm sure from the union perspective, you wouldn't want to endorse somebody. Let's say they endorsed Hillary Clinton, and their membership went with Bernie Sanders. That's not good. In either direction, it doesn't really work. But Sanders was out in Kalamazoo today. We know he's talking to young voters. In the past, he hasn't been able to get those voters to show up for him. If he can do that, maybe he can close the gap.
Quickly, on the Republican side, Trump, is he unstoppable?
It looks like Trump is going to be the nominee for the Republican Party, in which case that is not good news for the Republican Party. I'm especially focused on what that means in Senate races, because there's a bunch of Senate races around the country, and whether or not Trump can campaign for anybody else running for Senate in the country is yet to be seen.
All right. Jamal Simmons, thank you for being here. Nolan Finley, you're up next.
Hey, Steve, I've got two of our favorite people here. Two James would not be two James without these two folks, the hottest bartenders in Detroit. Andreas Joseph, Loretta Lucas. Look, you guys spend a lot of time listening to drunk people talk of politics. What are they saying, guys?
People have been feeling the burn around here. Yeah, they've been feeling the burn for sure.
Definitely feeling the burn.
Okay, we got it. We know the two James customers are for Bernie Sanders. And look who I have, Christy, Steve. I've got our old buddy, Devin Scillian, and we're sort of turning the tables here, right? We're usually on your show. This is the first time you've been with us, Devin.
I want to choke you right now. I'm not comfortable with this. I'm kidding, Stephen.
Choke Steve. I'm the good guy here. Hey, listen, you've had a lot of people, interviewed a lot of folks over the last several weeks, months really, about this election. Been covering this a long time, Devin. You've ever seen an election like this?
No, and that's what I keep trying to figure out. Are we watching an outlier, or are we watching a new normal? I for a long time was saying, like everybody else was, that look, Donald Trump's doing all this without spending any money, and I've come to realize that's not true.
Right.
He spent the last 15 years spending millions creating a brand, and that's what a lot of people are having a hard time competing with now, is the might of that brand.
Now, Devin, when you think about your viewers and the feedback you're getting, interest as intense as the campaign?
More so than I've seen in a long time. I think you're seeing that too. We look at the ratings of these debates, look at the ratings of programs like mine, like yours. I mean, there's a lot of people who feel very engaged and energized. And the theme of that, to me, when you take the Sanders supporters, the Cruz supporters, and the Trump supporters, they all come from a different place, but they all represent a fair amount of frustration.
Yeah, not much apathy this time. Now, Devin, when you look out and you know, you've asked a lot of experts, a lot of politicians, a lot of pundits, what they think the outcome will be, what's going to happen in November. Do you really feel anybody knows the answer to that question?
No, in fact, I was talking today by text with a very well-versed, highly placed Republican who is sent scurrying to the rule books, trying to figure out what an open convention means. I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to have to be boning up on the rules here, because it's really interesting to watch the scramble that's going on behind the scenes, especially as people understand that scramble will embitter a lot of people.
And that's absolutely right. And people have asked me, what do you think is going to happen in the election? What's going to happen in November? I say, ask my barber. I mean, who you see, I rely on, right? Ask my barber. He knows much about this race as I do. Devin Scillian, Channel 4. Thanks for being with us. Christy, back to you.
You know, Nolan and your barber does a great job. Just a great job. All right, I want to expand the conversation a little bit and talk about the role of women in this election and the women's vote and the possibility of having the first woman, a Democratic nominee for the White House. And joining me now is Sheila Cockrel. She is a former Detroit City Councilwoman. Sheila, it's always good to see you.
My pleasure to be here.
And Melissa Bogdaller, she is a Republican strategist. Melissa, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming on with us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this, Sheila, and talk to me about the importance of the female vote this time around.
Well, as is usual, certainly in the city of Detroit and in the Democratic Party, the women vote matters mightily. It is the foundation. It is the base that literally turns out election after election. I was at the Election Commission this morning, and steady stream of people voting, and 80% of the people voting were women. I mean, women are the heart and soul of politics in general, and certainly in turnout.
Melissa, from a Republican standpoint, how important is it to court the female vote at this point?
Well, I think it's very important, but I think, most women want the right person. It's not the right woman, it's the right person. So the chair of the Michigan GOP is a woman. So we get the right person for the job, but it's not just supporting a woman.
And that's interesting because that brings up a larger issue, because Hillary Clinton has been lagging with the female vote, and her campaign has been trying very hard to boost that. A lot of younger women are going for Bernie Sanders. And earlier in February, Madeleine Albright said there's a special circle in hell for women who don't support other women. Does a comment like that backfire for Hillary Clinton's campaign?
I don't think it helps. I mean, I think what really the position that Hillary Clinton is in is an indication that women have really come a long way. That for many younger women who were not part of the women's movement, the feminist movement, her running is less about her gender and more about her ideas and her politics. Personally, I think it would be an important statement that we finally reach the point in this country that a woman can be president of the United States. And certainly among the multitude of candidates running, she's one of the few who actually demonstrates the ability to govern a country, and that's going to ultimately be very important.
In terms of Republicans, Melissa, how would you comment on that?
Well, I would agree. I think the country is completely ready for a woman to be president. I think the right woman could be president at this time, and she shows that. I just think it needs to be the right person.
All right, ladies, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to go now. Stephen, who do you have over there in the corner? Stephen? See, you know what? I go to Stephen all the time, and either he's on his phone or he's not paying. Are you paying attention now, Stephen?
Do you see my phone in the shot? It's not
here.
I do. It's
I'm
in my
looking for
pocket.
it.
I am here with Craig Fahle, former host of the Craig Fahle Show, which was Detroit Today before I hosted it on WDET. He is now the spokesperson for the Detroit Land Bank. Craig, welcome to MiWeek.
It's a pleasure to be here, Stephen.
All right, let's talk about race, the role that race is playing in this presidential election. I've written a couple columns and said a couple things about race and the role it's playing on the Republican side. You think that's true, correct?
I absolutely do. And when I was watching Mary Madeline on Meet the Press yesterday saying she wanted to choke you for even bringing this subject up, I was a little disappointed because it's completely disingenuous to suggest that this has not been a factor over the last 8 years of the Obama presidency. It's been a huge part of this, and if people don't want to admit it, I'm still struggling with why that is.
Well, and the question is, what will Republicans do about it, right? I mean, 4 years ago, they got wiped out in the presidential election, largely because they could not attract the new voters who had come to the polls, mostly Hispanics, also a lot of African Americans, younger people. They said, we got to grow the tent. We have to expand the base. That hasn't happened.
Well, we have to stop being the party of stupid, right? And we saw the debate the other night, and we have to really ask ourselves whether or not they were taking that seriously, because all they have done is doubled down on a lot of the xenophobic rhetoric that we've been seeing for a long time. Your front runner is suggesting that we close the borders to all Muslims. You have them talking about building a giant wall and getting a foreign country to pay for it. This is not realistic.
Yeah. Let's talk about which candidates you think will be best for cities, for the kind of work that you're doing right now in Detroit with the land bank. Who's talking about the kind of investment that we would see that would make that easier?
Well, I do want to throw something out to the politicians in Ohio. Governor John Kasich has been a strong supporter of the funding coming to cities like Detroit and Cleveland for demo. We need that money.
All right. Craig Fahle, spokesperson for the Detroit Land Bank, thank you for being here. All right, we're going to go over to Nolan Finley now, who's got somebody else to speak to.
And look who I found. Debbie Dingell, I wanted to catch you before you got too much of this fine Grass Widow bourbon, which I know you have a weakness for. You've been out with Hillary Clinton all day, right? How does she feel about Michigan?
I think she's feeling very good. I think she's been working it hard. Her whole family has been here. I think it's going to be tighter than people have predicted, but I still think she'll win by a good margin.
Debbie, when this whole thing started and Bernie Sanders got in, did you give Bernie Sanders much of a chance of still being around at this point in the race?
You know, I think that this primary has been a very good primary. And I'd just like to make a point to you, Nolan, that the debate last night and how substantive it was and the values are heard versus the discussion of male anatomy we heard last Thursday.
Not as good for the ratings, though, right?
Nolan, they never even said the word autos last week. But I think that Bernie Sanders has done a good job. He's made her a better candidate. And we're going to have a much stronger candidate for the fall election than I suspect the Republicans.
Well, if you had to pick a candidate for your opposition, who would it be?
I would not pick Donald Trump. But I don't want to say that I support somebody because I'd hurt him.
So you would rather not run against Donald Trump in the fall?
I think Donald Trump will be a very difficult candidate. He's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen any day, and it'll make great for reality TV, but not for the real world.
You know you probably just put him over the top in Michigan, right?
I knew he was going to win before I said anything.
Christy, back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Nolan and Congressman Dingell. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at what some other voters are thinking about the race tomorrow.
This is my first election, and I'm really excited to vote, you know. My primary is on Tuesday, and I've been trying to get my whole family out to vote.
Anything that we can do to be more inclusive, to be more diverse, and to be more open to new ideas, I think is important for our country.
I'm kind of leaning more towards Bernie Sanders, just because he does seem a lot more open and honest about the things that he talks about and a lot more passionate.
All right, we hope that you've learned a lot tonight. You know, even if you knew who you were going to vote for tomorrow, we hope that Democrat, Republican, you had a couple of things to think about tonight and maybe kind of, you know, thought about something a little differently than you had before.
This worked.
And, you know, Nolan hit me and he said, this is working.
No fights. No fights on camera. I think that's huge, right?
You know
the amount of booze that's flowing in here.
It is big to have good, civilized conversation about politics.
And thanks to Two James Spirits, one of the hottest places in Detroit, Michigan Avenue in Corktown. Come down. If you haven't been down here, come down.
Yeah, I mean, and really come down for St. Patty's Day for the parade. I mean, I think they'll be open and going.
That's usually a bad day for me.
All right, guys. So before we leave you tonight, final thoughts on what we're going to see tomorrow, Stephen.
I don't think we're going to have the kind of surprises that we've had historically in primaries here. I think races will be closer than the polls show, but there will be no upsets.
Nolan.
It's Michigan. Michigan has a history of primary surprises, of doing really odd, unexpected things on primary day. Don't be surprised if this time tomorrow night we're talking about the Michigan surprise.
There you go. Expect the unexpected. Well, that is going to do it for our live show tonight, our live pre-presidential primary show for MiWeek. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, our great crew here that's here at 2 James who made this all possible, thanks so much. We will see you on Thursday night for MiWeek at 7:30. I'm Christy McDonald. Have a great night. Take care.
From the moment you wake up till you turn out the light, Masco is proud to be part of your everyday life. When you turn on the faucet for a cool drink of water, open a kitchen cabinet to set the family table, or freshen up a room with a new coat of paint, you do it all with Masco products. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.